Hey guys, it's Jesse. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite sort of nerdy business concepts, which is called allowable acquisition cost. Now, when you first hear that phrase or whatever, you might not even have a clue what it means, as I definitely didn't the first time I heard it. But what it really comes down to is a mechanism for knowing exactly what you can afford to do in order to get a customer. So let's look at a really simple example. Let's say that you start a candle business and you make candles, and let's say that it costs you $10 to make the candle. By the time you buy all the materials, you pay shipping, whatever else you have to do, the wrapper that goes around to the wick, all that stuff, you're paying $10 to make a candle. Well, what if somebody came to you and said, hey, you'd be more likely to get a customer if you were willing to sell that candle for $5? Obviously, you're going to tell them, I'm never going to sell that candle for $5 because I spent $10 just making it. It'd be easier to stand on the street corner and just hand out $5 bills to people, right? But what about this? What if you were in a situation where, let's say you normally sell your candles for $20 a piece, and you know that it costs you $10 to make them. So if you take $20 in revenue minus the $10 it cost you in expenses to make it, then that leaves you with $10 in profit, right? So let's say that you knew that for every person who tries one of your candles, everybody who buys one for the first time, you knew that on average, each one of those people would come back and buy 3 more candles over the course of the next 12 months. Then would it make sense to spend essentially $5 by charging $5 for a candle, even though you spent 10, you're losing $5, right? In that situation, would it make sense to give somebody a candle for $5 as long as they're a first-time customer? Well, in that situation, it actually might make sense, because what you're doing is you're losing $5 up front, but then you're selling 3 candles at $20 a piece in the next 12 months to the same person. So $20, $20, those added together make $60. And if you're spending $10 per candle making it, then that's half, right? Which means you have $30 you've spent and your total profit is $30 over the next 12 months. So if you're going to make $30 profit already just on what that person's going to buy later, then it could make total sense to lose $5 on the first purchase. So this really comes down to a concept called, which I'm also going to share this with you. It's called LTV, or lifetime value of a customer. Lifetime value, yeah, I was going to say customer isn't in there, there's no C. But LTV, lifetime value of the customer, is a really important concept to know, because you can't really discover allowable acquisition cost until you know it. So before I explain what LTV is, let's talk about allowable acquisition cost for a minute. So allowable acquisition cost really comes from the term customer acquisition, which is a fancy way of saying to get a customer. If you're getting a customer, you're acquiring a customer, whatever, it's all the same, just fancy words. But so allowable acquisition cost basically is talking about how much can you afford to spend in order to get a customer. That's your allowable acquisition cost. So it's impossible to know your allowable acquisition cost until you know your LTV, your lifetime value of a customer. Now, you never really know this for sure, because people are different, times change, all that different kind of stuff happens. But over time, you collect data, right? You track your customers, you put them in the system. You know that over the next 12 months, they're going to spend, on average, X amount of money. So the more data you collect and the more you track, the more you know how often your customers will come back and how much they spend on each trip and all that sort of stuff. It's why when you go to the grocery store, they want you to put in your rewards card number or your phone number or whatever, because they're tracking this sort of stuff so that they can get data to determine these types of things. So once you know that your customer is going to come back, let's say you know that every customer who spends $20 is eventually going to come back 3 more times and spend 20 more times each time. So it's 20, 40, 60, 80. So the lifetime value of a customer, let's say they came those 4 times and never came back, then the lifetime value of that customer would be $80. So here's why this is important. Let's say you're trying to come up with a promotion to offer your customers, and you want to know what you should give to them as an incentive. Now, one thing that I see all too often in business is, let's say you go to a trade show or something like that, you'll see people who are selling products or services that where the lifetime value of the customer is $20,000, $100,000, sometimes even more. And they're giving away the cheapest candy that they could find in the supermarket and putting it in a big bowl, and then they've got this boring booth. It's like bare bones. They were trying to save as much money as they could. Maybe they go all out one year and they have stress balls. right? That cost them like 5 cents a piece. Now, you also have situations where there are companies that are selling like $10 products, but they've got all kinds of swag everywhere, and they're giving away a cruise and all this kind of stuff. Now, hopefully they've done their data and they know why they're doing that, but in a lot of situations, people just get it backwards. And what happens is you end up losing money because you don't know your allowable acquisition cost. You're giving away more than you can afford to get a customer. Or in the situation of the stress balls of the candy jar, you could afford to give away a lot more to get a customer and grab their attention and win them over, but you're not even on their radar because you're trying to be so frugal and so bare bones that they never even notice or care. So when we learned this concept of the allowable acquisition cost, that's when we started changing the way we thought about what we could spend to get a customer. Now, previously, we would do things like we would stop into a potential client's office or something like that, and we would just drop off a flyer or something like that, and we'd drop off a very small gift, something that cost us maybe $1. Something just quirky that had our logo on it, like one of those little cheap drawstring backpacks or something like that. Well, what happened eventually was, after I learned the concept of allowable acquisition cost, we started thinking, wait a minute, if our lifetime value of a customer is in the 6 figures, over $100,000, then what sense does it make for me to limit myself to $1.50 or $2 that I'm willing to spend on a gift to get this customer? Now, here's where it gets a little bit more complex, because not everybody you give this gift to is going to become a customer, right? So you've got to do the math. And when you're selling, you got to know generally, and you find this out by tracking it over time, you'll find out that maybe 1 out of every 10 people you give this gift to become a client. So a $10 gift now becomes, if it's 1 out of every 10 people you give it to get a client, now you're giving away $10 times 10, right? You're giving away $100 worth of these $10 items to get 1 customer. So the amount that you get from this client needs to be enough, or this customer, the lifetime value of them needs to be enough to warrant you spending $100 to get them, right? So what we figured out eventually was, wait a minute, if our lifetime value of a customer is over $100,000, then why are we giving away these cheap little things that nobody cares about? That's when we started. We basically got a wine club membership and started getting all these bottles of wine in, and carrying huge cases out of the wine store, big enough that people were looking and why in the world do they need so much wine? But we were carrying these huge cases of wine out because we knew that we could afford to spend $15, $20 giving bottles of wine to people who may not even ever become a customer, because we knew that maybe 1 out of every 20 bottles of wine we gave was going to start a relationship that resulted in a new customer. So $20 per bottle of wine, maybe we had to talk to 20 people just to get 1 customer. That's $400 we spent. But let me ask you, would you spend $400 to get $100,000? If I came to you right now and said, if you just write me a check for $400, I'll give you $100,000. Would you do it? Of course you would. Over and over and over again. So when you break this concept down into allowable acquisition cost and you understand lifetime value of a customer, it really helps you understand how to market and how to sell to get customers and grab their attention and show them you're serious, show them you care, but without creating a situation where you're going to lose money. So hopefully you've enjoyed this concept. I would love to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section below. Feel free to share it if you've got friends who are in business and you think they could benefit from this. I would love to talk further about this with you another time, but we'll wrap it up here for now and talk soon.